follow along as I take this highly scuffed suit and transform it into something that looks nearly new. So, at some point, you made a mistake on the track and scuffed up your leathers. That's what happened to me. First time out on my new Bison leathers. Got a little happy on the throttle with cold tires, turn 5, Laguna Seca, 3rd session. And here's what happened. So, unfortunately, it's scuffed up and it's not looking as good as it did earlier in the day. Now we got to assess the damage. So the first things you really want to be looking at are the stitches. See if you've worn through any stitches or any stitches have burst. You want to see if any leather is torn either at the stitch or elsewhere. And you want also to take a look at your zippers and make sure they have not been compromised. So let's take a look, because I hit a lot of panels on this one. But fortunately, the airbag kept me super safe. Slid on my butt a little bit, rotated maybe 1.5 turns, got up and ran off track. The airbag deployed like it was supposed to. I mean, the function of the suit is absolutely fantastic. But here's where we are now. So a lot of the damage took place on the right side here. Now I've cleaned it up a little bit, probably about 50%. Using glass cleaner. It's pretty easy on leather, so it's safe to use. I wouldn't go extreme with any other types of cleaners. We'll get into cleaning it more later. Anyhow, looking at the seams here where there's any evidence of a crash, I'm looking pretty good on the sleeve. The inner part of my arm didn't hit at all. There's a bit of rash here on the right side. A lot of it on my hip here. Going down, checking out the knee. There is, and you'll find this particularly anywhere there's a lot of leather that overlaps. It builds up in thickness, and those are the areas that tend to break threads the easiest. So there's a little bit of a broken thread here at the knee. Now this is triple stitched, so I'm not super worried about that. And it is where there's a lot of leather thickness, so I'm also not too worried about that, though there are some other areas on here that do concern me. Looking at the back here, there's a little bit of thread that's ripped here on the Stingray panel. Not too bad, but should probably be addressed. This thick area of leather here as well. Got some broken threads. Same goes here. Mostly intact, and keep in mind this is several layers of leather all stacked on top of each other. Again, that's where you're going to see it the most. That's where you're putting the most pressure on the skin. And because you have so much leather there, it's not the worst thing in the world either. This panel looks okay. Threads look like they're intact. These burst. Now, if this was a structural panel, I wouldn't take this out before getting it fixed by a professional. But this is just a patch on top of the panel, so I'm not too worried about it yet. These things I'm going to have professionally fixed when I'm not riding, so over the winter. So take care of all that stuff then, but I'm really not too concerned about it as of this moment. It looks like this is a good candidate to continue on with. The zippers are fine. Bison uses these very heavy metal zippers, which are super cool as far as durability goes. I've had a zipper on another suit fail, and if you had a plastic zipper, once it fails, it's done. It's never gonna hold like it did initially when it was new. These metal zippers are definitely aggressive, and they'll withstand a crash much better. So that all looks good. Not worried about that. Okay, so next step, we'll address the cosmetic issues here. And although I did clean it somewhat, you're gonna have to be more aggressive with it because there is some dirt that is really embedded in there pretty good. We want to get all that dirt out as much as possible because when we go to fix this, we're basically just painting on top of it, and the more dirt we can get out of it, the better it's going to look. So the product I'm working with for that is Angelus Leather Prep and Deglazer. So we're going to have to address all the spots here, and there's quite a few of them. I'm going to focus mostly on this area here for the demonstration. I'll work with the red here, the white on the logo, and the white on the leg as well. And we'll see how this turns out. So the paints that I've gotten as well, I've got white Angelus specifically for leather as well as acrylic paint. There are other acrylic paints that you can use. From what I hear, the Angelus is maybe a bit on the thin side, but since it is specifically for leather, I went that route. And we'll need that. We'll need some brushes. I've got a simple set here. From what I understand, the softer the bristles, the better the finish will be. Although for these large sections here, I'm going to go ahead and use a foam brush. And as far as the cleaning goes, you'll need a couple towels, and you can use paper towels if you want. You just don't want to have anything that's going to leave lint. So I'm using these microfiber towels. All right, let's get started on the red here. Now I do expect that it's going to pull some of the color out of the leather. Not a terrible thing. We're going to color it anyway, right? But you know, the way this leather is made, probably 99% of all leather is just a painted coat on top of the leather. Most of it is also not actually the grain from the cow, but it's a stamped grain on there. So we can see, getting some of the color off, and we shouldn't be worried about that. Our main goal here is to get the dirt out as much as possible. Chunks of asphalt and whatnot. So you just want to scrub in little circles. And go over that with a dry towel and repeat as much as necessary. See, I've got this big black streak in there that I'm probably going to have a tough time getting out. I don't know if that was a piece of rubber or something on this tarmac. Seems strange that it's one really defined stripe of black there. Okay, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this either. It looks like I am. I'm not. I'm just trying to let the chemicals do their work. We don't really want to grind away at it. You can see some of the color being pulled away there. Not really worried about that. I think the black mark to leave. It seems like it might not be possible. I'm going to use a different product for the black. You could use this same technique for the black if you want. If it's not discolored too much in the black areas, then you could also just use like a leather conditioner, and that will kind of darken it a bit. And of course, it's good for the leather as well. In fact, that's probably the best thing you can do for the leather itself, because These all have a polyurethane coating on them anyway, so if you're putting conditioner on top of the urethane, it's really just going to repel it. It's not going to do much for the leather. I know you'll probably hear a lot of people saying otherwise, that you got to use this and that for the leather to keep it nice. But unless it's the original top grain and it's not sealed with PU, you're really not doing anything. You might feel good, like you feel like you're being a responsible rider and nice in your equipment and whatnot, but keep in mind you're not really doing anything when you do that. Yeah, other than spending money you don't need to. I mean, there are some that are top grain leather, maybe some and they're going to be real high end as well. The reason that you have a stamped grain on most leathers is that it makes it look uniform. And obviously, when we're talking about animals living in the wild or even fenced off, things happen. And even if the things don't happen to the animal, I'm just getting a good amount of dirt out of that. Maybe a barbed wire fence happens or whatever, but there's just a natural variation. It's a tighter grain from the back and it loosens as it goes toward the belly of the animal. And that looser grain also stretches more. Anyway, they like to hide some of the imperfections by stamping it with the artificial grain to make it look even. Make a very high-end product would. But I do have some jackets, like a Revit jacket I recently bought that's on the more expensive end of the spectrum, and it does have the natural top grain on it, which I guess it's one of those like curses of knowledge. Like once you know, you're like, oh, now I can appreciate the quality of the garment a little bit better. I wouldn't worry about it for racing suits and stuff like that. It's not a big deal. It doesn't make it any less performance oriented or anything like that. So I'm going to now focus a little bit more on the white areas here on the lettering, the applique, as well as these white leather panels. You can see there's a mixture of dirt and red dye that's been removed. Some of that wetness. And as far as the white goes, there's some dirt here. Some of it that looks like it might be dirt is basically just the white finish that's been worn off down to the base leather. You can see it's getting a little bit nicer, just thus far. I just want to get as much black off as I can, even if I'm taking white off in the process, because it's going to be harder to hide underneath the white paint. But this is mostly a case of do the best you can. It's not going to be perfect. We'll try to make it look as perfect as we can, but it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. We're really just prepping it, getting the leather ready so it can accept the paint. You want it to have a little bit of a tooth to it, as they say, to accept the paint. So if you take a little bit off there, that's going to help. I'm just using these microfiber towels that came from Costco. They're not good. They're actually too good. They're so good they're kind of not good. I wouldn't use them on paint or anything like that, or once anything is finished on this, because what they do is they pick up debris so well but they hang on to it too well. So even when you wash it, some of that debris just stays in there and it scratches whatever you're working on. The whole point is to remove the debris, right? So, all right, so I'm going to go away from the red here because that's just going to put more red on the white. Hopefully we can get this white cleaned up nice. I'm not sure what all is in the deglazer. It does smell a bit like nail polish remover. So you do want to have a fairly well ventilated space or a large space to work in. Some of this is cleaning off really, really easy. The parts that aren't cleaning off really easy, it's just worn beyond the surface of the leather, the top grain there. This does work really nice if it's just a little bit of dirt. I wouldn't use it as a suit cleaner, on a regular basis because it is pretty aggressive. But for this purpose, if you're recovering the leather with more paint, then by all means, works pretty nice. So, obviously there's some areas here that aren't back to factory fresh by any means, but those are, like I was saying, those are the ones, and you can feel it. It's a little rougher there. That's just where it's been worn through. You want to get as much dirt out of there as possible, of course. All right. So that's good for the section that we're working on for this. Now, if I wasn't filming the video, I would just go ahead and do the whole suit and all at once. And at the end, I'll show you what that looks like when it's all done. But for our focus, I'm just going to take a look at this. Now it does say to let it sit for a few minutes. So it's been a few minutes as far as the red is concerned. So the plan of attack here is I'm going to do the red first, and now I'm going to follow up with the white. For the fine details here, I'll definitely need to use a brush because I don't want to get any extra white on the red surface. If you want to mask it, you could do something like that. Like if you were to add stripes or something like that, masking would work. But for this, I think I'm confident enough with a brush that it'll look all right. I am a little concerned about this dark streak here. We'll see what happens. I do believe that's as good as it's going to get. And using the foam brush, this is just for the larger areas, and I want to keep it contained as much as possible to the affected area and then smooth it out from there. So the color that I've chosen for this project is what Angeles calls fire red. And you can only tell so much online, right? But that is what I thought looked the closest. They have other reds, and you can certainly mix the paints, they say. And the first thing you want to do is just lay down a thin coat. We'll worry about the actual color matching later in the process. But just a real thin coat, just cover it up, and that'll give you a nice base to go on top of. Already I can see that's looking quite a bit better, right? And it's just a little bit of paint. There's not a lot I'm adding to the brush here. And I do want to stay away from the white areas with this. I don't want to make repainting the white areas any more difficult than it needs to be. And this is by far not a precision instrument here. So So it's interesting, it looks like this accordion panel may have been white leather with like a red print on top of it, other than being dyed red and then painted red afterwards. Because that color came off really easily. So far, I'm really impressed with how much it's covering. Just on this first really thin coat, I'm barely putting any on the brush, and I'm spreading it out over a pretty large area. And I can see there's still some glossy red here, so it's still not quite dried. I'm in a climate-controlled garage. It's about 75 degrees in here, so it should dry pretty quickly. I'll set this aside. It's hiding really nicely. I gotta say, this is maybe even better than I anticipated, maybe even better than I hoped for. One of the helpful things about using a wedge-shaped foam brush like this is it's nice to get into the accordion panels here. Lets you get down to the bottom of them pretty nicely. I do see where it's kind of wanting to fill in there, maybe a little too much, so I'm going to drag some of that paint out because, once it dries and then you flex it, it's going to want to break in those little valleys. So I'm just going to drag that out and maybe thin out the coat there a little bit. All right, so that's layer one. I still have a bit of shine here on the red, so I'm gonna let that sit a bit. Wait a few minutes to come back to this. While that red is drying, I can touch up the letters here, right? So I've got my small bristle brush. And it helps us a raised surface. Makes it a lot easier to paint. Like I said earlier, if you're not confident in your brush skills, you can lay some masking tape down there if you want to be very, very precise. So I find it best to start off in the middle of the panel. So applique here, and just kind of work your way out toward the edge. Not too shabby. So this paint can just be cleaned up with water in your sink. It's clean up real easy, and maybe a little bit of soap if you choose. The red's a little shiny, but it's not tacky anymore. I think we're ready to put on another coat there. I think the color ended up matching really well. Angelus makes, I think, 3 different kinds of red. As I recall, there's this fire red. There's also, I think, just a general red, and there's a scarlet. And if you want to be really super accurate about it, you could start mixing them. Of course, I would definitely wait till the very last coat if I was going to mix paints, because it's really hard to duplicate that sometimes. And this coat, I'm going to go a little bit heavier, but not super sloppy or anything. I would describe this as a medium coat. And again, sticking to the damaged area. Build that up as much as possible before we start blending. And then kind of daubing it on. What I'm finding by doing that with the foam brush is that you don't get streaks like you might with a bristle brush. It's working out nicely. I'm very happy with the results so far. Of course, you don't want to wait too long in between coats either, unless you're planning on washing out your brushes every time, which is my least favorite part of painting anything, cleaning up. When it comes to doing these kinds of touch-ups, inspecting the suit for damage, Bison's YouTube channel has some great info on that. I recommend that. I'll link to it in my description. But they just have an entire video over different kinds of crashes and different things to look for. I've covered it in a sort of quick fashion because it's more of a restoration video than it is assessing crash damage. That can definitely be its own thing. Suit construction details and things like that could be their own video. We're just going to keep it down to restoration for this. Just one coat on that eye. Looks really good. I'm going to leave that as is. What's the red doing here? It's a little bit tacky still. I'm going to wait a couple minutes. I'll be back here. Pick up where we left off. What I'm seeing is it's still a little darker in the affected area, but it is coming along nicely. I'm really happy with the results so far. I mean, even if it never got better than this, it would still be 10 times better than it was before, right? But we're gonna keep going and see just how good we can make this look. Kind of getting off into the areas that got cleaned that weren't necessarily damaged, because it does look a little pink in those spots. I'm super happy with the color matching. This fire red is, and it's almost perfect. That gives you a pretty good idea of what their regular red is, right? Definitely it's definitely just a bit less intense, I suppose, is the word for it out. I'm not even sure that darker is the right word. It's just not quite the intensity that this is. With that big black streak that came through here, not so bad really. I have heard that the Master's Touch paints are a little thicker. They hide maybe a little bit better. But if I'm going to go repair leather, I get stuff made for leather. Not stuff made for canvas. Yeah, it may be exactly the same thing, but And your whole brand is based on leather products, you probably know what you're talking about. And that's the case with Angelus. Now it is Angelus, so a little bit different than Los Angeles. Find this on Amazon. That's where I got mine. I am not paid by either Angelus or Bison, or Amazon for that matter. I tell you, if they wanted to send me a product, I would definitely review it. Alright, that's pretty good. And move on to white. So let me rotate this so you can see the white better. Looks pretty good, right? I'm happy with it. I'm happy with it. And I'm using so little. These are just, I think, 4-ounce bottles. Yeah. It's going to go a long way. Now, I'm not looking forward to have another crash. If I did, I think I'd have plenty of paint for it. I mean, there's plenty of surfaces for me to still go over as it is. So I'm going to count my chickens before they're hatched, but I think I'm going to be just fine as far as the product is concerned. Okay, so the shine has gone away for the most part here. And what I can observe is that fire red is a bit darker than the leather was naturally. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and recolor. Now that I've got the damaged area corrected, I'm going to recolor the entire panel up to a point and just try to fade it on out. So you can see that this part does, well, it does look way, way better. It also is a little conspicuous. So, I mean, you can certainly stop at this point if you wanted to. I'm going to continue on. I think I'm at the right stage here where I can finish the panel off. I might even not even go through this lettering here. Seems kind of a natural transition there, but I will go at least up to it. It doesn't have to be perfectly to the edge either. I mean, you're just increasing your risk of getting paint where you don't want it by doing that. And I'm going to make it real thin as well. All right, I think that's feathered out pretty well. And that. I am going to go with the fourth coat of white on the letters. Still a little dingy in some places. But for the most part, really good. Really the only dingy parts are the ones that got ground down more than the others. Here's where we are with the lower leg. See, it looks great. And a portion of this is even going to be hid inside my boots. I want it to look as good as possible. And the white really blended perfectly. It may seem like a no-brainer, but you know, sometimes whites can be difficult. There's not just one white. Gray, if you're trying to mix up gray, best of luck to you there. Gray is, in my opinion, and all the development work that I did in this industry, gray is the hardest color to match. Because it can be off in any direction of hue. You can be too green, too red, too blue, all that stuff. Whereas, you know, obviously it can be too light, too dark as well. So there's all that to manage. When you get a color like red, it's either, I mean, it can be too blue, it can be too, sort of purplish, it can be too orangey. But it's only really going to be off in either one of those directions in addition to the value. Gray can be off in any one of 6 directions. So don't let that put you off actually doing this, but just be aware if you're going to try to match a gray, it's going to be difficult. And you might want to follow a similar process to what I did, and just make sure that you lay down something close that's right out of the bottle first, and then you can always go back later and refine that color and try to dial it in to whatever the rest of it is. Or you may have to take a larger approach and just cover all the gray that's in your suit. Okay, I'm gonna let this dry for a little bit. I think as you can see, it's looking pretty darn good. I'm super happy with it. The color was just darn close enough, you know. I guess the only thing I might add would be like a touch of white if I was gonna do that, but it's not worth it. It looks good as is. The white just hid fantastically. I am gonna fade this out a little bit more though, because you can kind of see where I painted. I'm just gonna kind of dry the brush out and drag it along. And that gets you a better blend. Okay, yeah, let this dry, and then I'm going to take a little different approach with the seat of it, which did get scuffed up. That's the only black panel, I believe, that did get scuffed, and I'm going to use a leather dye on that. This Dr. Tools, if that's how it's pronounced, stuff that I got off Amazon, and it's a leather dye that will get in there and get the color of the base layer more close to the color of the finished layer. Okay, now the red is all dried. How does that look? It looks so good. I'm really impressed with it. Basically, the only thing I can tell about this is that there's, you know, the grain has disappeared from some of the areas because obviously it wore off, but probably touch up this a little bit more. But this panel is looking fantastic. I'm very happy with how that turned out. Let's move on to the rough. Alright, now we can see how that's scuffed up and discolored. So what I'm going to do is same cleaning process with the glaze, but then I'm going to go over it with the leather recoloring balm to get the black back. And there's a scuff on the Bison logo here, so sorry Rob and the crew of Bison, but what I'm going to end up doing here, I think, is cleaning this up and recoloring this entire panel black as well. Our Angelus leather prep and deglazer. There's a spot on my rag that isn't already colored. Just use those circular paths like they say to use. Of course, with the black, it's impossible to tell what's the color you're taking out and what if it's just dirt. We'll clean this up as much as we can. I'm going to go ahead and try to get in there at the bottom of the accordion panels. And hopefully it covers the white. I'm not sure that it will. But we're going to give it a shot. You know, it's not going to look much worse than it already does. So. Can see that it's taking a lot of that white off, at least knocking it back quite a bit. So the seat does have that broken stitching. The reason I'm not really all that worried about it in those locations is, like I said, there's multiple layers of leather. There's probably like 4 to 6 layers of leather in that one location, maybe 5 probably. There's also a second layer in the butt. So if you should, you know, skid along on your bottom, it's not the worst thing in the world, because that is one of the few places on the suit that does multiple layers of leather, at least on a decent suit. Okay. This area here is good to go. So I'm curious to see how this recoloring balm is going to work. Here's some noises in the background. It's the shop dog. Just found something to chew on. All right, so the directions for this say to use the gloves and to apply the product with the brush and then work it in with the sponge. And then later you can buff it out if you like. So this is really thick. Balm is the right word. All right. Just paint that on there. Whether it's going to match the rest of the black, I don't know. We'll find out. It does cover pretty well. Well, I'd say their brush isn't the best in the world. But considering it's probably only ever going to be used for this one thing, why spend money on it if you don't have to? I'm just really trying to work it in there, but the sponge will also serve that purpose. Make sure I don't get it any on the red where I don't need it. You can definitely see what direction I skidded. Everything is going at this angle, this 45-degree angle here. So working it into those grooves. Brush has a couple rogue bristles. is not exactly what you want when you're trying to be accurate. So I'm not going to go too far close to the edge here. All right. Probably a good application there. Into the sponge. It says to use in a circular motion to work the material in to the leather. Those look pretty good. Oh, I almost forgot. I gotta get into that logo, don't I? There is quite a bit of drag, so actually working in a circle is maybe a little more difficult than it seems. Perhaps if it wasn't already, scuffed up, it wouldn't be such an issue, but that does look pretty good. So far, so good. Let's see what we can do here with the accordion panel. It'll be interesting to see if I need to blend this out as well for the color. Sort of like it's not nearly as bad as gray, but black can also be difficult to match for the same reasons that it said of it. As far as the hue goes, sometimes it ends up a little bit purple, sometimes it ends up a little bit on the green side. It can really go any direction. So, I kind of feel bad for the folks at Bison ending up covering up this logo, but it's going to look better than if I hadn't covered it up at all. Just have a scuffed logo. I know if it was my business, I'd rather have no logo than a messed up logo. So I might try a second coat because it did darken it quite a bit. This little air hide decal logo, I should say, is dry a bit. Actually not affected. I think I'm just going to leave it. See what happens. So unless I need to blend it in for color purposes, that can stay as is. I don't think it's going to cover completely, at least not with just the single coat. We'll go back to the sponge. Yeah, the logo's coming through quite a bit. See if I can find a way to hold this up so you can see it better before I continue. It really is kind of a dark gray. Be careful so I don't get this black off my hands and anything else onto the panels that don't need it. Let's give it another go. This time I think I'm going to let it set a little bit before I go to the sponge. Maybe if I let it wait a little bit, it'll be more sponge worthy. So when I use a sponge, it really drags basically the stuff around. I think it's probably gonna be better off that I just let this set here and dry out. So when that's happened, just add it back in here and I'll show you what the dried out product looks like. And we'll do a little before and after on the panels that I worked on. And I'm gonna go ahead and do the entire suit now, and we'll get a little before and after on that as well. And to finish up here, there is some slight color difference in the black, and it's really shiny from that second heavy coat that I put on and left on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cover the complete panel and get most of the accordion panel as well, and then I'm going to rub it in with sponge like the directions say to do, and hopefully that will take the gloss off of it a bit. Hey, Franklin. So I'm just applying it to some of the areas that I didn't before because the sheen is a little bit different. Just trying to even it out a bit. That's a seat. I really don't care a ton about that. It's really not a part that's seen very much. But yeah, if you're doing something else as black, maybe this might help you out a bit. You're doing it like a more visible panel. Just kind of fade it out so it doesn't look quite so splotchy. At least that's the intent. And I'm just going to put a light coat here on the accordion. I'm really worried about the valleys so much this time. I just want to get it on the top and hopefully dull that excessive shine there. And I am going to cover a bit more of it just in case that doesn't really work. Okay, now we find out. Now, as far as the paint goes, I was using before the red and the white. If you actually find that too glossy, you can do something about that. They have Angelus as a sort of deglosser. And so you can make it a little more matte finished if you like. I think this is working out. I did drag a little bit of black off of there. I'm just gonna put the tiniest dab on. It's probably where the S is in the logo. Just leave that little bit there to dry. Yeah, that does look significantly better, so I'm happy with that. Awesome. So the leather repair, if you call it that, the scuff repair, I think it's finished. I'm super happy with it. It's turned out really well, much better than I expected, as good as I could have hoped for. So I'm pretty psyched about that. All right, so let's take a little bit of a look at our after. I'm also going to show you some of the before pics. Does it look perfectly new? Nope. But it looks a heck of a lot better. Yeah, I definitely recommend trying this process. Really, it took me a few hours to get it all touched up, but hey, it looks fantastic, right? All right. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you out there.